Hello all, a very good day to all of you. We meet again, all the PU2 students. So this is DMG. Today we'll be discussing the second PUC complete revision of your Springs textbook, the quick revision or the quick summary of the first 6 chapters of your Springs textbook, that is literature. So previously we had done both the model question papers. So today we'll be doing chapter 1 to 6. In the upcoming classes, we'll be completing chapter 7 to 14, okay, and important questions as well. So this is the most crucial part of the academic year wherein all of you will be preparing, okay. So don't worry, we will be here, we'll be giving you regular updates, and we will be helping you with what you require to prepare for the board exams as well. So we'll move on. So today we'll be discussing the first 6 chapters of your Springs textbook, okay? Moving on. Yeah, so the first chapter, Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. So initially what happens, Romeo attends a ball that is thrown by the Capulet family, and Romeo sees Juliet and is mesmerized by her. But before he liked Juliet, he liked another person, okay, and that person was Rosalind, right? So this this chapter starts after, or this particular part of the chapter is when Romeo sees Juliet and he is completely mesmerized by her, right? Okay, so Romeo is completely transfixed by Juliet's beauty, describing her as a light so radiant she actually teaches torches how to shine. To him, she stands out against the darkness of the room like a sparkling diamond against dark skin, or a pure white dove moving among a flock of common crows. We see the particular usage used in the lines as well. He immediately questions his past feelings, specifically his recent love for Rosalind. So as we discussed earlier, before his eyes fell on Juliet, he initially was infatuated with another woman, and her name was Rosalind, right? So we see this transition of feelings from Rosalind to Juliet, okay, and he's mesmerized by Juliet. So whatever feelings he had for Rosalind, it moves to Juliet, okay. His recent love for Rosalind, dismissing them as fake because he believes he has never seen true beauty until this very second. He resolves to find where she stands once the dance is over, so he can touch her hand and be blessed by the contact. So this is what Romeo says. He's absolutely mesmerized by her beauty. He says that she's so bright, so fair, that she teaches the torches to burn bright at night. Okay, and he also compares Juliet to other women by saying that she looks like a snowy dove or a white dove among a troop of crows. Okay, kind of racist, we can say, Romeo. Okay, and he also says that she looks like a jewel in an Ethiop's ear. So a jewel in an Ethiop's ear is basically the sparkling diamond against the dark skin. So yeah. So these are the inherent themes in the first chapter. So light versus dark. Romeo uses high contrasting imagery like torches, night, snowy dove, black crows, okay, to show how Juliet pops out of her surroundings. Hyperbole. Hyperbole is again exaggeration. He claims she is too rich for use, suggesting her beauty is so divine it shouldn't even belong on earth. Okay. And fickleness. It's a classic love at first sight moment, but it also highlights Romeo's tendency to jump from one obsession to the next in a heartbeat. So we see that also. Initially, Romeo used to like someone called Rosalind. Okay. But as soon as he sees Juliet, all his feelings for Rosalind goes away. So it's fickle, right? His love or his feelings, you can say, is fickle in a way. Moving on. The core themes, okay. So simile, we see simile being used in the in these following lines. Romeo uses several comparisons using like or as to explain Juliet's rarity. Like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear is a simile. Okay, like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear is a simile because he's comparing, right? He's comparing Juliet's beauty to a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. So like is used. So what did we learn? If simile uses like or as for comparison. He compares her brightness to a sparkling earring against a dark complexion. as yonder lady over her fellows shows. He compares her presence among other women to a superior being among commoners. Okay, metaphor. Unlike the similes, these are direct identifications that elevate her status. So, if as and like are not used, and if it's a direct comparison without, if there is no, if you don't use like or as, and there's a direct reference, it becomes a metaphor. So, a snowy dove trooping with crows is a metaphor, okay, because like and as, the comparison is not used. Juliet is the dove, a symbol of peace, purity, and beauty, while everyone else is a crow, common, loud, and dark. So he's using these expressions to show how fair and how beautiful Juliet is as compared to the yonder women or other women. Juliet's soliloquy. So what is a soliloquy? Speaking one's thoughts aloud to themselves. When you speak aloud, okay, to yourself loudly, okay, when you think loudly, that is soliloquy basically. So this famous soliloquy. So we finished. We finished whatever Juliet thought of Romeo. Romeo thought of Juliet. Now the second stanza, that is Juliet's soliloquy. So this famous soliloquy from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet captures Juliet's intense, impatient longing for her wedding night. So a plea for the night. So Juliet personifies the night, begging it to arrive quickly. So what does she say? Come, gentle night. So she's personifying something that has no human qualities, right? So night, giving human qualities to non-human objects or things. So to her, the night isn't dark and scary. It's a gentle and loving protector that hides her private life from the world. Romeo as light. She uses a striking contrast, an oxymoron, by calling Romeo day in night. She describes him as whiter than new snow on a raven's back, suggesting that his presence provides its own brilliant light even in the pitch black. Immortalizing her love. In a beautifully macabre bit of foreshadowing, she asks the night to take Romeo when he eventually dies and cut him out in little stars. So this is how Juliet wants to immortalize Romeo. Okay, after he dies, she wants the night to cut him out in little stars. So the garish sun, she argues that Romeo's beauty as a constellation would make the night sky so magnificent that people would stop worshipping the bright garish sun and fall in love with the darkness instead. In short, Juliet is so deeply in love that she wants to skip the day entirely. She views Romeo as a light so bright that he could outshine the sun and turn the entire world into lovers of the night. Okay, here also simile is used. So whiter than new snow on a raven's back, again comparison. So she tries to say that Romeo is whiter than a new snow on a raven's back. This highlights the stark contrast between Romeo and the night. Metaphor is also used. Take him and cut him out in little stars. She isn't being literal. She is comparing his beauty to the eternal brilliance of constellation. So with that, we finish the first chapter. Yeah, the slides will also be available to you in the group. Okay, you can access the slides. So if it's a quick preparation, you can just access this slide rather than reading through all the chapters in your textbook in detail. Okay, chapter 2, Two Deer. Again, a very interesting lesson. Two Deer by Leo Tolstoy. Yeah. The story is set in Monaco, a tiny kingdom on the shores of the Mediterranean. It is so small that it has only about 7,000 inhabitants. It's a very small kingdom. Okay, as we read, only 7,000 inhabitants, and its army is even more small. Surprisingly, only 60 people in the army, right? 60 men, an army of 60 men. So it's a very small kingdom. As a result, the king or the ruler of the kingdom is not called the king. The writer sarcastically calls him the kinglet. Okay, the same way how we call the young one of a pig as a piglet. Okay, the writer sarcastically addresses the king as a kinglet because he rules over a very small namesake kingdom of Monaco. So the revenue. The kinglet of Monaco survives on taxes. Okay, what are the taxes? What does he tax? So he taxes tobacco, wine, and spirits. But his main source of income is a gaming house where roulette is played. Okay, he knows gambling is dirty, but he needs the money to keep up his royal lifestyle. We also learn that gambling was once upon a time very addictive in the rest of Europe. But countries like Germany, they ban gambling altogether. Why? Because their citizens get addicted to this game and they commit suicide, they end their life. Okay, so it kind of affected the society, which is why gambling was banned. But since the King of Monaco had no other source of income, he was forced to run this gaming house, and there was nobody to stop him also. So what is roulette? In the previous slide we saw. This is the game of roulette. Okay, so our king had a similar gaming house. So people used to come, even from other countries, they used to come to Monaco, they used to bet their money. So this used to spin. Okay, and most of the time the house would win. So if the house won, a small percentage of that amount would go to the king. So this was the revenue. Okay, this was how the Kingdom of Monaco used to run. He knows gambling is dirty, but he needs the money to keep up with his royal lifestyle. So a particular incident happens. What was the incident? A murder. So a murder occurs. This is a shock because the people of Monaco are usually peaceable. Peaceable as in they live a peaceful life. The murderer is caught, and following the laws of big countries, he is sentenced to death. Okay. So they follow the example of the other big countries. So if you are caught for murder, you'll also be convicted for death penalty or capital punishment. So phase 2. What happens after he was convicted of death penalty? Phase 2, the logistics of death. This is where the satire begins. The king and his ministers realize they have a fancy law, but no fancy tools. The guillotine. Okay, the guillotine search. Monaco has no executioner and no guillotine. They write to the French government. France offers to lend them a machine and an expert for 16,000 francs. So Monaco, being a small kingdom, they never till now had to use the guillotine. What is a guillotine? It's a machine used to kill people. So they did not have this equipment, they did not need it till now. Okay, but now all of a sudden, since they have this criminal here, they need to punish him and they need the guillotine. So they write to the French government. And what does the French government say? We are ready to give it to you, but we will charge 16,000 francs. Okay, 16,000 francs a piece. Now it's very difficult for a small kingdom like Monaco to buy a guillotine for such a high amount. Why? Because as we discussed earlier, there are only 7,000 people in Monaco and each person should be charged 2 francs each, which is a huge amount. Yeah, the budget crisis. The king calculates that 16,000 francs would mean an extra tax of 2 francs per person. He decided the murderer is not worth the money. Okay, what does he do? The French government, their offer is very expensive. So Monaco cannot afford it. Next, they write a letter to their other neighbor, Italy. Okay, the Kingdom of Italy. So the Italian alternative. They ask the King of Italy. Italy, a brother monarch. Okay, the King of Monaco or the Kinglet of Monaco addresses the King of Italy as a brother monarch. Why? Because Italy is also a monarchy like Monaco. However, France is a democracy. So Italy, a brother monarch, offers a discounted price of 12,000 francs. Still the kinglet refuses. He doesn't want to start a riot over taxes just to kill one man. Okay, phase 3. So now they realize that buying a guillotine is very expensive affair. So they think of a cheaper alternative. Okay, so it's phase 3, the cheap alternative. Life imprisonment. Since they can't kill him, they decide to lock him up for life. This way, they look merciful while saving money. Okay, so this was the alternative. They, they reduce the sentence from capital punishment to life imprisonment. So after this was done, another problem arose. What was that problem? The new problem. Monaco has no strong prison suitable for a long-term stay. They find a small lockup and hire a guard to watch the prisoner and fetch his food from the palace kitchen. Of all the places, the food was coming from the palace kitchen. So basically the same food that the king was eating, the prisoner was also eating. What a lifestyle. So the yearly audit. So after a year, after the end of the year, the king looks at the accounts. So between the guard's wages and the food, the prisoner is costing 600 francs a year. Okay, extra 600 francs. So the king realizes the man is young and might live another 50 years. So why does he feel sad that the man is young and would live for another 50 years? Because every year, another additional 600 francs, okay, would mean in another 50 years, it would cost roughly 30,000 francs, which is a lot more money. Okay. Yeah. Phase 4. The attempted escape. The ministers decide to fire the guard to save money, hoping the prisoner will simply run away. The reality check. At dinner time, the prisoner sees there is no guard. Instead of running, he walks to the palace kitchen himself, takes his food and goes back to his cell, locking himself in. So the confrontation. So they see this, okay, and they're surprised. The prisoner does not want to run away. So there is no guard, there is nobody stopping him. But the prisoner, he does not run away. What does he do? He goes to the palace kitchen himself, gets the food, comes back. Now they are surprised and they're also angry. Okay, the confrontation. When asked why he won't leave, the prisoner gives a logical, devastating argument. They ruined his character with a death sentence. So no one will hire him. No one will hire him as in no one will give him a job. Now, should the prisoner go outside, okay, the people of Monaco will recognize him. Oh, this is that guy who committed murder. So his character is tarnished. They will not give him a job. And moreover, he's living a very comfortable life in prison. Okay, he's getting food from the palace kitchen. He has food and accommodation provided. Why will he run away, right? So he has got out of the way of working. The state treated him badly by not executing him when they said they would. So now the state owes him a living. This is what the prisoner is saying. So what is the prisoner basically trying to do? Gen Z people, you guys use a term, gaslighting, right? So the prisoner here is gaslighting the king and the council, okay, into thinking that they are wrong. Phase 5, the final settlement. The only way to get rid of the man is to pay him to leave. The pension. So finally they decide they'll give him a pension. So the council agrees to pay him an annual pension of 600 francs. Okay, the resolution. The prisoner receives an advance. Okay, how much is the advance? 1/3 of the pension amount was given to him as advance. Okay, only then he decided to leave the kingdom. Receives an advance, leaves the kingdom. He buys a bit of land just across the border and starts a small market garden. He returns to Monaco every month to collect his pension, gambles a few francs at the table, and lives comfortably and peaceably. So this is how the story ends. Okay, the prisoner gets a pension. Normally, who gets a pension? Government employees. People with meritorious service get a pension. Here, the prisoner is a murderer, and he walks away with a pension. Okay, and he lives a comfortable life. And once in a while, he'll come to the same gaming house and he'll gamble a franc or two. Okay, he knows he can't waste all his money. So he'll just gamble a franc or two and he'll come back. Okay, so that is how the story ends. So the final lesson. The story concludes with the biting observation that it's a good thing the crime didn't happen in a country where they don't care about expenses. Okay, because in Monaco, the murderer actually ended up with a better life than the honest taxpayer. Okay, see, it's pretty ironic, it's pretty sad. Okay, but that is exactly what happened. The murderer here walked away with a pension. The honest taxpayer, he or she has to continue working. So sarcastically, Leo Tolstoy is trying to say that it's a good thing. The crime didn't happen in a country where they don't care about the expenses. Key takeaway. Tolstoy is arguing that state institutions like the army and the law are often just expensive, absurd performances. And the performance gets too expensive, the government is forced to show its true face. A business that cares more about money than justice. So this is what Tolstoy is trying to tell through the lesson Too Dear. So we finished the second chapter. Moving on. Yeah, so here we see the image of the prisoner arguing with the king and the council members. Right, so the prisoner was released from prison and the king asked him, right? The kinglet asked him. So this is a particular scene where the prisoner is arguing with the king and the council. Okay. Chapter 3, On Children. On Children by Khalil Gibran. Okay, a very meaningful, a very thoughtful, a very beautiful poem. Chapter 3, On Children. So this poem is an advice to parents on how to raise children, right? It's an advice to parents, okay? So the concept of ownership. Gibran begins with a startling truth. Your children are not your children. So that's the most important line in the poem. Your children are not your children. Okay, he explains that while children come through you, they do not belong to you. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. That is the exact lines in the poem. So what does it mean? The lesson, parents should provide love, but they must not impose their own thoughts or identities onto their children. Okay, Second, focus on the future. Gibran emphasizes that children live in the house of tomorrow, a place parents cannot visit, even in their dreams. House of tomorrow means children will live on to see the future that parents will not see. Okay, the same way how your grandparents will not see the future that your parents will see, your parents will not see the future that you will see. So, Gibran emphasizes that children live in the house of tomorrow, a place parents cannot visit, even in their dreams. The lesson, parents should not try to make their children like them. Life moves forward, not backward. Trying to mold a child into a mini version of a parent is a disservice to the child's unique destiny. So this is something that resonates well with parents of today. Parents should not try to make the child the mini version of themselves. Okay, the child should be given the absolute freedom to grow and adapt to the present situation. The metaphors of the archer, a very important part of the poem, is the metaphor that the poet uses. So one of the most famous metaphors in literature appears at the end of the poem. The bow. The parents, the bow refers to the parents. Stable, supporting and providing the initial force. The bow is the parent. The bow cannot control the arrow. Okay, it is the archer that controls the arrow. The bow should be stable. The arrow refers to the children. The children, dynamic, living and headed towards a target in their distance. Okay. The archer here refers to God or life, the force that aims the arrow. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. Okay. The bow should be stable, the arrow flies. Meaning, it is destiny that shapes the future of the child, not the parent. A very beautiful poem. Moving on. Chapter 4, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in the Forest by Vandana Shiva. Okay. Vandana Shiva is an internationally renowned activist for biodiversity and against corporate globalization. In the essay, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in the Forest, she explains about her early lessons of environmentalism. She also tells us how she learned the ideals of a good life from the forest, such as diversity, freedom, and coexistence. Vandana Shiva's ecological journey started in the forests of the Himalayas, a very important point, okay. Where did her ecological journey start? In Himalayas, okay. Chipko movement was one of the first movements that she got inspiration from, okay. She was even a part of Chipko movement. So, her involvement in the contemporary ecological movement began with Chipko. What is Chipko movement? It was a non-violent response to the large-scale deforestation in the Himalaya region. In the 1970s, peasant women in the Garhwal Himalaya had come out in defense of the forests. Vandana Shiva noticed a gradual loss of forests in the region. She then decided to become a volunteer for the movement. So that is how her activism or her environmentalism started. Started off with a Chipko movement, very important. Biodiversity, okay. So, the idea of Navdanya farm or Navdanya movement, where did she get that from? So, Vandana Shiva started the Navdanya farm. Okay. So, Navdanya farm, Navdanya movement. So, Chipko movement taught Vandana Shiva biodiversity. She realized the importance of biodiversity-based living economies. Hence, she started Navdanya, a movement for biodiversity conservation and organic farming in 1987. Vandana Shiva has worked with farmers to set up more than 100 community seed banks across India. They have saved more than 3,000 rice varieties. So they have something called seed banks. You would have read in the lesson as well. They keep something called seed banks, where seeds are preserved for future use. Right? Yeah. They have saved more than 3,000 rice varieties. This is a transition from monoculture to biodiverse ecological system. To demonstrate her experimentation, she started Navdanya farm in 1994 in the Doon Valley. Is very important. Where did she start Navdanya farm? In Doon Valley, in the lower elevation of Himalayan region of Uttarakhand province. They are now able to conserve and grow 630 varieties of rice, 150 varieties of wheat, and hundreds of other species. Thus, they practice and promote a biodiversity-intensive form of farming that produces more food and nutrition per acre. Okay. Rights of nature, separatism, eco-apartheid. Vandana Shiva interestingly talks about how the UN General Assembly organized a conference on harmony with nature as part of the Earth Day celebrations, inspired by the Constitution of Ecuador and the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth initiated by Bolivia. Again, very important, okay? Which country adopted the biodiversity, or which country adopted which country adopted biodiversity into their constitution? It was Ecuador. This emphasizes the importance attached to Mother Earth, contrary to human domination over nature. She upholds a view that human beings are an inseparable part of nature. So she feels that today we do not need an apartheid situation which once divided people based on color. So in history you would have learned there was apartheid, right? People were separated based on color. Similarly, there is something called eco-apartheid in nature, is what Vandana Shiva is saying. Our challenge now is to overcome eco-apartheid based on a separateness of human from nature. So she's trying to say that human beings are also part of nature. So let's not destroy it. The dead earth or industrial revolution, dead earth theory. This separateness paved the way to industrial revolution that replaced vibrant earth by turning it into dead matter. Okay, this has further led to capitalism and consumerism, which exploit natural resources indiscriminately. Okay, if you see industrialism, okay, they thrive by killing the environment. They thrive on dead matter. Okay, cutting of trees is what fuels industrialization. Okay, destroying natural resources, exploiting the earth is how industrialization grows. Okay, so nowhere do you see industrialization coexisting with or helping with the growth and the maintenance of nature. So Vandana Shiva is trying to say that industrialization is basically killing or banking on the dead earth and not the living matter. So this has further led to capitalism and consumerism. Yeah. Thus, terra madre, Mother Earth. So terra madre is Latin. Okay. Terra madre, Mother Earth, was replaced by terra nullius, the empty land, the dead earth. Okay. Moving on. Yeah, the Earth University. Vandana Shiva also started the initiative, the Earth University. Again, very important. The Earth University teaches Earth democracy. So the Earth University, located at Navdanya Biodiversity Farm, is an inspiration from Rabindranath Tagore, which teaches Earth democracy. Rabindranath Tagore had written one of his books, right? Tapovan, essay. Yeah, so that essay also talks about this biodiversity. So she got a lot of inspiration from that essay to recognize, protect, and respect the rights of other species. It is a shift from anthropocentrism, human-centered, to ecocentrism, nature-centered. Okay, from a small age we are taught that human beings are in the center of the chain, okay, which is not true. Okay, human beings are not on top of the ladder. We are just one small part of this ladder. So that is how Vandana Shiva is also, that is what Vandana Shiva is also telling us. Ecocentrism, nature should be in the center, not humans. Okay. Yeah, with that we conclude chapter 4. Chapter 5, A Sunny Morning. A Sunny Morning was discussed previously, also a short summary video. We are doing this again. Chapter 5, A Sunny Morning, the only play in the entire textbook. The plot summary. So the story takes place on a beautiful morning in a quiet corner of a park. Okay, we have two characters, Donna Laura and Don Gonzalo. So the meeting. So what happens? Donna Laura, a sharp-witted elderly woman, is feeding breadcrumbs to pigeons. So she's sitting on a bench, as you see here. Okay, and she's feeding pigeons. You can see pigeons here. So she's feeding breadcrumbs to pigeons. Her piece is interrupted by Don Gonzalo, an old grumpy gentleman who arrives and scares the birds away. They initially bicker and trade insults. So they first start by pulling each other's leg, okay, and chiding or insulting each other. The discovery. As they share a pinch of snuff, tobacco. Snuff is a kind of powder, okay. So you inhale that powder. So as they exchange a pinch of snuff to settle their nerves, they begin to talk about their pasts. So they slowly realize that they were once young lovers in Valencia. Valencia is a place in Spain. Okay. The Silver Maiden and the dashing gallant horseman. Yeah, gallant horseman. The deception. Instead of admitting their true identities, both characters lie. They are too proud to show how much they have aged or changed. Gonzalo claims he is a cousin of the real Gonzalo and tells a tale about how he died a hero's death in the war. Laura claims she was a close friend of the real Laura and describes how she died tragically on the beach with her lover's name on her lips. Okay, so coincidentally, the old man that is Don Gonzalo, is Donna Laura's long lost lover. Okay, and as they talk, they realize that the other person, okay, sitting in the bench with them is their long lost lover. But they try their best to not disclose their identity. What does Don Gonzalo say? This gallant horseman, okay, he was my cousin and he went to Africa and he fought for the Spanish army and he died holding the flag of Spain in his hand. He died speaking or died whispering the name of his lover. Donna Laura also lies. What does she say? This silver maiden, okay, silver maiden is my friend, and she used to wait for letters. She used to wait for information for a very long time. She used to sit beside a rock near the shore until one fine day the heavy tides washed her away. So both are lying to each other. Why are they lying? We'll find out. Laura claims she was a close friend of the real Laura and describes how she died tragically on the beach with her lover's name on her lips. Moving on. The conclusion. Both know the other is lying and both realize who the other truly is. However, they choose to preserve the beautiful memories of their youth rather than face the reality of their old age. They agree to meet again the next morning. The humor comes from the dramatic irony. We see here that something called dramatic irony is used. What is a dramatic irony? Now, when you're seeing a movie or when you're reading a book, okay, so now you know the twist, okay, you realize the twist or you realize what the suspense is, okay, you know who the villain of the story is, but the rest of the characters in the book or in the movie do not know who the villain is or who the hero is. So that is dramatic irony. When the reader or when the viewer realizes something that the other character in the movie or the play does not, that is dramatic irony. So here also we see dramatic irony. Why? Because we know that at a certain point Don Gonzalo and Donna Laura are long lost lovers, but they themselves do not know that they are talking to the other person. So that is dramatic irony. So the audience, we the audience know they have recognized each other, but we watch them spin elaborate lies to stay young in each other's eyes. So dramatic irony is used here. Yeah, chapter 6, the last chapter, when you are old. Okay, when you are old. So the setting of the future, so time frame is very beautifully used here. So Yeats begins by asking the reader, and he's addressing the beloved, his long lost he's addressing his lover, okay. He's writing this poem, he's dedicating it to his lover, hoping that she will read it. So Yeats begins by asking the reader, the beloved, to project herself into the future. He paints a quiet, somber scene. She is old and grey and full of sleep. So what is he asking her? He's asking her to think of the future, okay, the future where she's old, okay, she's old and weak and very sleepy, very tired, nodding by the fire. He wants her to pick up this very book of poems and remember her youth. Physical beauty versus spiritual love. The second stanza highlights the difference between his love and the love of others. So the others, many loved her for her moments of glad grace and her outward beauty. Okay, their love may have been sincere, but it was superficial. Why was it superficial? Because it relied on the outer appearance of this beloved. The poet, he alone loved her pilgrim soul and the sorrows of her changing face. He loved the essence of who she was, even the parts that were sad or would eventually age. Okay, so what he's trying to say is, he loved her for who she was, her character. Okay, the others loved her for her outward appearance. Third, the bitter regret. The poem ends on a melancholy note. He imagines her leaning over the glowing bars of the fire, murmuring a little sadly about how love was fled. Okay, the metaphor. So here also metaphor is used. Love is personified as a figure that paced upon the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. So the lesson, love is no longer accessible to her. So in the future, as she is old and tired and sitting by the fireside, she realizes that she cannot access love now. Okay, so she's sitting and regretting. It has become something distant, cold and celestial because she failed to cherish it when it was right in front of her. Okay, so the poet is warning her. Okay, today you do not recognize my love, tomorrow you will regret. Yeah, moving on, chapter 7, The Gardener. So P. Lankesh's short story, The Gardener, is a rich allegorical tale that explores the complexities of human nature, specifically how rivalry can become the sole purpose of a person's existence. The main theme, okay, of this story is rivalry, understood? How rivalry fuels people. And here there is a rivalry between Tamanna and Basavaya, so which is the main theme of the story as well. So the arrival of the old man. So the story begins with the narrator describing a veteran gardener who arrives at a coconut grove near Chennaraipatna. The plantation owner, who was previously struggling to manage the farm, hires the old man. So the plantation owner hires this old man knowing very well that he's experienced, which is why it is given veteran gardener. So he's experienced, which is why the old man was appointed. Okay, and the plantation owner was previously managed farm hires the old man. Yeah, the gardener is incredibly hardworking and knowledgeable. Under his care, the petty thefts stop and the farm begins to flourish financially. However, this prosperity changes the owner's lifestyle. He becomes lazy, takes up vices. So what are vices? Bad habits. Okay. So what happens eventually? The old man, he takes charge of he starts managing the activities within the plantation. So the plantation owner has very less work. Okay. So very less work, but the finance also improves. So with more money and with less work, what eventually happens? He becomes lazy and he starts spending his money on bad habits. So those are vices. Okay. And his social prestige grows, leading to a strained relationship with his wife. So he starts spending money on gambling, on adultery, on drinking, so many bad habits. So his wife is now tensed. She's in a situation. Okay. So yeah, the tale of Tamanna and Basavaya. To explain the complexities of human behavior to the owner's worried wife, the gardener narrates a story. So what eventually happens? The owner's wife, she's now worried, okay, with the present state of affairs, the present situation wherein the owner is most of the time, okay, spending his money on a lavish lifestyle. He's being a spendthrift. He's spending it on bad habits there too, and he has very less time for his family. So the wife is concerned and she approaches who else but the old man. So when she approaches the old man reads her mind and he tells her the story of Tamanna and Basavaya, the most important part of this lesson. So the tale of Tamanna and Basavaya. To explain the complexities of human behavior to the owner's worried wife, the gardener narrates a story, which is implied to be his own life story, about two men, Tamanna and Basavaya. So the two main characters in the story are Tamanna and Basavaya. The competition. So they were rivals in a small village. If Tamanna bought 4 acres of land, Basavaya would buy 10. So this tit for tat competition eventually escalated until Tamanna had 1,000 acres and Basavaya had 800. So almost all the property in the village was either owned by Tamanna or Basavaya. So they became very powerful landlords. The power move. Unable to buy more land, Basavaya forcibly took 200 acres of Tamanna's land. So this is where the story takes a shift, okay, a twist, you can say. So Basavaya encroaches or forcibly takes Tamanna's land, 200 acres of Tamanna's land. So the shift in rivalry. So instead of going to court or using violence, Tamanna hit upon a unique idea. So all his friends suggest or tell Tamanna to go to the court, file a case, or take men and fight and get the land back. But Tamanna is creative, okay. So what does Tamanna do? He hits upon a unique idea. What is a unique idea? He started composing and singing ballads. Ballads are these folk songs, okay, village songs. So songs that are composed in the village, rural areas, okay, and these ballads usually tell a story, a complete story. Very simple songs to understand. So what happens? Tamanna starts composing ballads about Basavaya's cruelty and greed. So every ballad that he composes, Basavaya is the character, and Basavaya is portrayed as a villain. Okay, so people start listening. Okay, just like rumors, right? So people listen to these ballads, they sing to other people. So in a short period of time, these ballads become very famous. Okay, and it goes to other villages as well. So whose reputation is damaged now? Basavaya's reputation. So art as a weapon. Tamanna became famous as a poet. His reputation spread far and wide, while Basavaya was left humiliated. To compete with Tamanna's art, Basavaya tried to perform his own songs and decorate himself with gold and mansion. He builds a very big mansion also, a house. But he couldn't capture the soul of Tamanna's poetry. The paradox of the enemy. The rivalry reached a point where Tamanna realized his entire identity was tied to Basavaya. Okay, and people associated each other, okay, with their rivalry only. Tamanna, how was Tamanna known as? Tamanna was known as Basavaya's rival. Basavaya was also known as Tamanna's rival. They did not have their own identity. Okay, so the rivalry reached a point where Tamanna realized his entire identity was tied to Basavaya. He theorized that man needs an enemy to survive. To truly defeat Basavaya, Tamanna decided to annihilate his own identity. Annihilate as in destroy his own identity. So how would he try to do that? To leave the village, okay, and to leave the village, and thus he thought of destroying his own identity. Okay. He gave up everything, declared himself dead to the world, and walked away. Without Tamanna to compete against, Basavaya lost his reason for living and passed away shortly after. So this is what happens, okay. Basavaya was not happy with the way Tamanna was destroying his reputation, humiliating him day in and day out. But the day Tamanna left the village, okay, the day he lied to the village that he died and he left the village secretly, Basavaya fell ill. And Basavaya died. Like this time he died for real. Okay. Why? Because Basavaya had no motivation to live. Okay. You see Tom and Jerry cartoons. Okay. Jerry's motivation is Tom, and Tom's motivation is Jerry. Similarly, there is always some sort of rivalry that motivates people. Here, Tamanna was Basavaya's motivation, and vice versa. Basavaya was Tamanna's motivation. So when Tamanna declared to the world that he was dead, Basavaya lost all motivation and he fell ill. Okay, and he died. So the gardener reveals that he is actually Tamanna. So that is towards the end of the story, he says he is Tamanna. After Basavaya died, Tamanna forgot his songs and his pride, becoming a simple gardener. So all the ballads that he composed, the songs he composed, had Basavaya as a villain. So the day Basavaya died, Tamanna had no reason to compose these ballads. So he naturally forgot these ballads. That's what he says. Okay. He reflects on the fact that humans are complicated creatures. Yeah. Moving on, chapter 8, To the Foot from Its Child, the famous poem. Alright, here we have an image. Yeah, the foot and the environment that it has to deal with as it grows. Yeah, To the Foot from Its Child by Pablo Neruda, very famous poet, a very famous poem, is a philosophical and poignant poem that uses a child's foot as a metaphor for the journey of life, the loss of innocence and the eventual weariness of the human condition, the dream of flight, innocence. The poem begins with a child's foot that does not yet know it is a foot. It dreams of being an apple or a butterfly. At this stage, the child's imagination is limitless, and the foot is unaware of the constraints of gravity or the physical world. Constraints as in limitations. Constraints are limitations, okay. So the foot is basically is a metaphor for the journey of life, or basically us human beings, okay. So the foot here dreams of being a butterfly or an apple. Meaning the poet is trying to say that the foot has no limitation to it towards its imagination, okay. The same way we human beings in the early stages of our life, when we are a child, our aspirations, our dreams know no limitations. Some of us dream to be artists. Some of us aspire to be astronauts. Some of us aspire to be Formula 1 Formula 1 race drivers.
Some of us aspire to be, our ambitions know no limits. But as we grow up, okay, the harsh realities of life start hitting us. So in the same way, the food here also, now it has no limitation. It dreams of being an apple or a butterfly, okay? But only we know, only the third person, we know that the food cannot be an apple or a butterfly as it grows, okay? Yeah, the constraints means limitations. The hardening reality, experience. So as the child grows, the world begins to teach the foot its true identity. Through contact with stones, bits of glass and the cold ground, the foot loses its soft, rounded shape. Okay. So what happens? The bare foot, as it walks or as it gets exposed to the outside world, okay, it experiences or it comes in contact with the harsh surroundings, the glass, the stones, the rough earth, okay, and all this gives a very harsh, a very bad experience to the tender foot, okay. So what naturally happens? Now the tender foot cannot go out, now it cannot go out without protection. Now it cannot go out bare feet. So now it has to restrict itself to shoes, okay. The shoes. Neruda uses the shoe as a metaphor for societal imprisonment. The foot is imprisoned in a leather cage, losing its connection to the earth. So the same way how we restrict the foot within the shoe, within the limits of the shoe. The same way societal constraints, okay, limit us. So the shoe basically refers to societal constraints or societal imprisonment. The transformation, it becomes calloused, scarred and blind. What is calloused? Becoming hard, okay. As you grow, your feet also become hard, okay. The feet of an infant is soft when compared to the feet of an adult. The feet of an adult is calloused or hard, okay. So it becomes calloused, scarred and blind. It loses its beauty and its dream of flying, settling into the mechanical rhythm of walking. The long toil, adulthood. The foot spends decades performing its duty without praise or rest. It walks through fields, mines and markets. It becomes a member of a team, the body, doing the heavy lifting while the person's eyes see the world and the tongue speaks. The foot is the silent, hard-working laborer of the human anatomy. Basically trying to say that we are all like this only, eventually, okay. We'll all go, we all go with the flow, we all go with the pack. And we do not become, the very integral members of the society. We just work, okay. Just like how the feet in the human body continues to work without getting any credit, we also grow up and start working, okay, and our work is never credited. The return to ignorance, death. Eventually the journey ends when the person dies and the foot is buried. It finds a strange kind of liberation, finality. In the darkness of the grave, the foot no longer knows it is a foot. Okay, so cycle completed. Hence the cycle completes. It ceases to be a prisoner of the shoe. In death, it returns to the same state of unawareness it had as a child, though it no longer dreams of being a butterfly or an apple. So when the infant was just born, the feet dreamt of being a butterfly or an apple. The feet had no limitations. There was no shoe holding it. In the same way, as the person dies, the feet again, it's bare feet, okay, and the feet is descending underground. This time again it has no limitations. But sadly, the feet cannot dream like it did, okay, some time ago. Yeah, the next chapter, chapter 9. I believe that books will never disappear. Yeah, in his famous essay interview, Jorge Luis Borges argues that books are the most astounding of human inventions because they are an extension of our imagination and memory rather than just our bodies, the extension of the mind. Borges compares the book to other human inventions. The microscope and telescope are extensions of our sight. The telephone is an extension of our voice. The plow and sword are extensions of our arms. It's P-L-O-U-G-H. Plow and sword are extensions of our arms. The book, however, is an extension of our memory and imagination. Okay. So what is he basically trying to say? That the only way our imagination or our thought is being projected is in the form of books. So why books are irreplaceable? Unlike other tools that serve purely functional purposes, the book contains the sacred element of human thought. Borges believes that as long as humans have a need to dream and remember the past, books will exist. To him, a book is not just a physical object, paper and ink. It is a relationship between a writer and a reader that comes alive every time it is opened. The concept of the sacred. Borges suggests that we treat books with a level of reverence as in respect, okay, respecting something. Level of reverence that we don't apply to other objects. He argues that even if technology changes, the function of the book, that is to preserve the human spirit, cannot be replaced by anything more efficient. 4. A defense against technology. Writing at a time when mass media like television and radio was rising. So apparently at the time when this interview was taken, TV and radio were very popular. And still Borges argues that books will still stand the test of time. Okay. So he says Borges remained unfazed. He argued that oral tradition and visual media are different experiences, but the depth of reflection provided by reading is unique to the written word. Okay. Chapter 10, the poem, Heaven If You Are Not Here on Earth. In his celebrated poem, Heaven If You Are Not Here on Earth, the great Kannada poet Kuvempu, K.V. Puttappa, challenges the traditional religious idea of a distant afterlife heaven. So we are all, irrespective of our religions, told that heaven exists in the afterlife. It is a place where you go to after you die. Okay. So Kuvempu, Rashtrakavi Kuvempu makes us think otherwise. He tells us why not ponder an idea of having a heaven here on earth? Because when you close your eyes and think of heaven, you are basically thinking of the good things in nature that already exist. Can you think of a heaven can you at least think of something that you have not seen? The image that you get of heaven is basically the elements that you've seen in earth, all combined together. So basically Kuvempu is trying to say that heaven exists nowhere else but on earth itself. Okay. Yeah. He argues that heaven is not a location in the sky, but a state of mind and a way of seeing the beauty of the world around us. So the rejection of a distant heaven. Kuvempu begins by stating that if heaven does not exist right here on this earth, it cannot exist anywhere else. He dismisses the idea of gods and nymphs. Nymphs are basically angels, celestial beings. Gods and nymphs living in a celestial realm, suggesting that these are merely human imaginations. Nature is divinity. The poet finds the divine in the physical beauty of the natural world. He points to the roaring stream and the gentle sunlight, the lush greenery of the forests, the harvested fields and the moonlit nights. To Kuvempu, these are not just scenery, they are the actual manifestations of heaven. So when you take a moment and you admire the nature around you, the scenery around you, you see an element of heaven in it. Okay. So this is basically what Kuvempu is trying to say. When you take your time and you observe the roaring stream or the gentle sunlight, the lush greenery of the forests, okay, or the moonlit nights, this is where you find a piece of heaven. Okay. So heaven exists nowhere else but on earth itself. Yeah, the role of the poet. Kuvempu believes that it is the poet, Kavi, who creates heaven on earth. By drinking the nectar of nature's beauty and translating it into song or poetry, the poet helps others see the magic in the mundane. Mundane means something that you see regularly. Okay. So heaven is a state of being. The poem suggests that if we can appreciate the splendor of a sunset or the richness of the earth, we are already in heaven. We do not need to wait for death to find peace or beauty. We only need to open our eyes to the heaven that surrounds us every day. Okay, so here again, Kuvempu is trying to say that it is the poet through his poems, through his written literary works, that he creates magic. magic in what is usually perceived as something ordinary. Okay, so this poem itself is the best example. Okay, now the sunset or the lush greenery, things that we see every day, we do not appreciate them. But when we read this poem, we realize the magic in nature. So that is exactly what the poet does. Okay, he tries to highlight the things that we see every day, things that we take for granted. Okay, and through that he creates the heaven on earth. This is exactly what the poet is trying to say. Moving on. Chapter 11, Japan and Brazil through a traveler's eye. This is a travelogue basically. Okay, so a travelogue is basically travel writing. You're traveling somewhere and you're writing your experiences, first-hand experience. So here the writer highlights first-hand experience of two countries, Japan and Brazil. Okay, towards your left you can see Japan, towards your right you can see Brazil. In his travelogue, Japan and Brazil through a traveler's eye, George Mikes uses his characteristic wit and gentle irony to observe the cultural quirks of these two distinct nations. He focuses less on landmarks and more on the social codes that define the people. Okay, first country that he highlights is Japan. So the art of social grace, the culture of bowing. Mikes describes bowing as a complicated hierarchy. It is not just a greeting, it is a measure of status. The same way how Indians greet with a namaste, the Japanese people greet with a gentle bow. Okay. He notes that the Japanese have an uncanny ability to judge the exact depth and duration of a bow required for each person. He humorously points out that even on train platforms, people bow to one another with rhythmic precision, turning a simple gesture into a complex national ceremony. The etiquette of eating soup. So after highlighting on the culture of bowing, he talks about the etiquette of eating soup. Okay, even when you're slurping or eating soup, there is a kind of etiquette or manner you should follow in Japan. Okay. In a reversal of Western manners, Mikes highlights that eating soup in Japan is a noisy affair. While Westerners are taught to eat quietly, the Japanese believe that slurping soup is a sign of appreciation and enjoyment. To eat silently would be a sign of poor taste or a lack of enthusiasm for the meal. So if you make noise when you're drinking soup, it's considered a good cultural etiquette in Japan. The burden of courtesy. Courtesy in Japan is described as both beautiful and relentless. Mikes observes that the Japanese are super courteous, often to a degree that feels exhausting to a foreigner. This politeness acts as a protective shield or mask, ensuring that social harmony is never broken, even if it means hiding one's true feelings or frustrations. Next, Brazil, the rhythm of chaos. The traffic culture, in stark contrast to the disciplined rows of Japanese citizens, Mikes finds Brazilian traffic to be an expression of the nation's soul, spontaneous and chaotic. So the people there do not follow rules as such. Okay, there is so much chaos in the Brazilian roads, is what the writer is saying. So the jeitinho. Drivers in Brazil don't see traffic laws as rigid rules, but rather as suggestions. The philosophy of the road. He notes that the act of driving is treated like a competitive sport or a dance. There is a certain warmth even in the chaos. Drivers are aggressive, yet somehow carefree, prioritizing getting to their destination with flair rather than following a lane. So basically the people in Japan, they would keep following traffic rules as a secondary. Okay. To Mikes, the traffic is a perfect metaphor for a country that prefers the excitement of the movement over the boredom of order. Chapter 12, the voter. So this picture basically summarizes the entire story of the voter. In The Voter, Chinua Achebe provides a satirical and sharp look at the corruption and moral dilemmas inherent in post-colonial African politics, specifically focusing on how the democratic process is manipulated. Okay, this is relatable because a lot of things that are happening in this story are relatable even in the Indian political context. Okay. The protagonist, Rufus or Roof Okeke. So he's the protagonist, the main character in the story, Rufus Okeke. Roof is a clever, charismatic young man who serves as the election campaign manager for the Honorable Marcus Ebe, a minister in the current government. Roof is highly skilled at enlightening the villagers of Umuofia. So where is he staying? Where does he reside? He resides in Umuofia, okay? On why they should vote for Marcus. Marcus Ebe is their candidate, okay? He's also a minister, so they vote for Marcus Ebe. On why they should vote for Marcus, usually through a combination of empty promises and small bribes. The politician Marcus Ebe, the next important character in the story. Marcus Ebe was once a simple school teacher, but has become incredibly wealthy and powerful through his political position. He has built a grand mansion, ironically called Umuofia Mansions, okay? And just for that small thing, the people of Umuofia are highly indebted. Marcus Ebe was a simple school teacher, okay? So he had humble beginnings, but now he has built a very big mansion, okay? And people obviously will start cribbing. They will start complaining, okay, where is the money going to? Okay, obviously he's spending that on building his own mansion. So what did Marcus Ebe do to shut their mouths? He named his mansion Umuofia Mansion. Okay, so now the people of Umuofia are very happy. Oh, he did not forget us. He named his big house after our village. So now the people are happy. So these small things are enough to make the people of Umuofia highly indebted to their leader. Okay. And provides gifts to the village like a local slaughterhouse to secure their royalty. The shift in the village. The villagers, once naive, have become cynical. Okay. Earlier they were gullible. You could easily convince them for empty promises. You could lie to them and they would still vote for you. But now they realize the power of the vote. Okay. Now they know that they can bargain for their vote. So what do? They start asking for bribes. They realize that while Marcus has grown rich, they have remained poor. Consequently, they no longer give their votes for free. Okay. They now demand shillings. Shilling is a currency. Shillings and gifts in exchange for their support. Viewing the election as a time to extract some of the wealth Marcus has accumulated. The moral conflict. The climax occurs when Roof is visited by the opposition party. So we have two parties here, PAP and POP. POP is the opposition party. Umuofia, however, votes for PAP and their candidate Marcus Ebe. He has like complete support there. So opposition cannot make much of a change. But what do the opposition do? They visit Marcus Ebe's house. Okay, I'm sorry, Rufus Okeke's house. When Rufus is visited by the opposition party, the POP, they offer him £5, a massive sum, to vote for their candidate Maduka. So Maduka is the opposition candidate. He is contesting against Marcus Ebe. The oath. To ensure his loyalty, they make Roof swear on the E, a powerful traditional deity. So just like in India, they also have deities and gods, okay, that they greatly worship and adore. So they ask Rufus to place his hand on the idol, the E, and promise or swear to vote for Maduka. So now he believes in the power of the deity, the E. So if he lies to them and votes for Marcus Ebe, he knows that the E or the deity will curse him. So now he's in a fix, he's in a dilemma. The powerful traditional deity, the dilemma. Roof is a loyal servant to Marcus, but he is also a greedy man who fears the supernatural power of the oath. The resolution, a literal split. On election day, Roof enters the voting booth paralyzed by his double dealing. To satisfy both his loyalty to Marcus and his fear of the oath, he tears his ballot paper. Okay, here we have voting machines. Okay, over there it's ballot paper. So you write the name or you choose the candidate on paper, you fold the paper and you put it in the box. What does Rufus do? He tears the paper, and in one paper he writes Maduka's name, and the other paper he writes Marcus Ebe's name, and both he puts on the ballot paper and in the ballot box. He tears his ballot paper in half. He drops one half into the box of Maduka, fulfilling the oath, and the other half for Marcus. He walks out with a clear conscience, believing he has technically voted for both. Key themes: political corruption, the transformation of democracy into a marketplace where votes are bought and sold. Traditional versus modern, the clash between modern political systems and traditional beliefs. Okay, we see that the PAP party, they bank on the traditional beliefs. Cynicism, the loss of idealism in the community as they realize politics is a game of greed. The big idea, Achebe uses roof to show how individuals navigate a broken system, highlighting that in a world where everything is for sale, integrity becomes impossible. Moving on, chapter 13, where there is a wheel. P. Sainath's Where There Is a Wheel is a powerful piece of reportage that documents a social revolution in the Pudukkottai district of Tamil Nadu. Okay, Pudukkottai district made headlines around 2 to 3 decades ago. Why? Because most of the women there achieved 100% female literacy, and moreover, most of the women in the district of Pudukkottai learned to cycle. Okay, so this was a big revolution some 3 decades ago. It explores how the humble bicycle became a tool for radical change, particularly for rural women. The core movement. In one of India's poorest districts, over 100,000 rural women, many of them neo-literates. Neo-literate as in people who just got literacy. Okay, they could not attend school in their younger days, so later on they studied. Okay, so those are neo-literate people. So they took up cycling as a social movement. This wasn't just about transport. It was a deliberate act of defiance against patriarchal constraints. What are patriarchal constraints? Basically men ruling the society, men setting up the rules, okay, restricting women. Okay, so this is patriarchal constraint. So the impact of mobility. The story highlights that for these women, the bicycle represents 3 things: independence, freedom, and mobility. Economic gains. Women no longer had to wait for infrequent buses or rely on male relatives to transport their goods. That is, agriculture produced stones from quarries to markets. Time efficiency. Cycling reduced the time spent on chores like fetching water or taking children to school, allowing more time for leisure or earning. So earlier, if all of this work had to be done barefoot, or if this work had to be relied on men to be done, now thanks to cycling, or thanks to women knowing how to cycle, they could do all this work efficiently, and they could save a lot of time as well. Social status. It broke the fetters of a male-dominated society. Even when men made dirty remarks, the women ignored them, asserting their right to move freely. Key figures and catalysts. So this is very important. Who were the key people? So Sheila Rani Chungat. It was all this idea, okay, the idea of pushing, or the idea of enforcing this cycle literacy among the women of Pudukkottai. Sheila Rani Chungat's brainchild. The former district collector who pioneered the idea in 1991, she pushed banks to provide loans so women could buy bicycles, integrating mobility into the literacy drive. Arivoli Iyakkam, again another very important name is Arivoli Iyakkam. Light of knowledge, the literacy movement that gave the cycling drive social sanction and organized training camps. The gents cycle. Due to a shortage of ladies cycle, many women bought gents cycles. They actually preferred them because the additional horizontal bar allowed them to seat a child on the front. Moving on, chapter 14, the poem, The Water. The Water by Challapalli Swaruparani is a poignant, politically charged poem that uses water as a witness and a metaphor for the history of the caste system and social injustice in India. Instead of seeing water as a neutral, life-giving element, the poet reveals it as a divider that carries the memories of centuries of oppression. Okay, as they say, he who controls water controls the land, or controls a particular land. So water has so much power. Okay, so in India, even water is associated with caste discrimination. Okay, and how? That is exactly what this poem is throwing light on. Water as a social map. The poem begins by asserting that water is not blind. It knows the ground's low-lying nature. This is a double entendre. Literally, water flows to the lowest point. Metaphorically, water knows who is at the bottom of the social hierarchy, the Panchamas or Dalits. Here, a fifth caste is introduced, that is Panchamas. They are considered to be even more inferior to the untouchables or Shudras. So, they are the ones who suffer the most in villages. So, it is a witness to the untouchable being denied a drink while the upper caste person pours it from a height to avoid pollution. Second, the site of conflict, the village well. The well is depicted not as a source of life, but as a battleground. The humiliation. The poet describes the humiliation of the pot and the shame of the Dalit woman waiting for hours for a drop of water. Okay. The violence. It references the Karamchedu massacre, 1985, where Dalits were attacked by dominant castes for protesting the pollution of their drinking water. So the key figure was Karamchedu Suvartama. She tried to stop some higher caste people from bathing the buffaloes in the water which they used to consume. Okay, so this became a very big protest for protesting the pollution of their drinking water. The water here is stained with blood and tears, transforming from a clear liquid into a record of atrocity. The paradox of purity. The poem highlights the hypocrisy of the caste system. Water is used by the upper castes to purify themselves after coming into contact with a Dalit. Yet that same water is denied to the Dalit to quench their little thirst. The poet notes that while a pariah cannot touch the water, a beast like a buffalo is allowed to wallow in it freely. Okay, which is quite ironic and sad. Transition to a commodity. The poem shifts from the village well to the global market. The mineral water era. The struggle has evolved. What was once a fight for human rights at a local well is now a multinational commodity. So this multinational commodity is sold in bottles across supermarkets for money. I mean, you get it in return for money. Water is now trapped in a plastic bottle sold for profit, while the poor still walk miles for a bucket of muddy water. This highlights the intersection of caste and capitalism. Conclusion, the angry water. The poem ends with a warning. Water is not just a victim or a witness. It is a force. Whether it is a tsunami that swallows cities or a drought that kills crops, water eventually humbles all hierarchies. It is a multinational market commodity, but it is also a primal power that can submerge the very world that tries to chain it. Yeah, with that we complete chapters 7 to 14. So all the best for your exams. Hope your preparations are underway. So we'll come with more such videos. The slides will be accessible in the WhatsApp group. Okay, so all the best for your exams. Thank you.